The eyes of the nation will be on Michigan tomorrow for the presidential primary vote. The outcome appears to be all but certain, but one super PAC is here trying to flip the script. 7 Action News reporter Brett Cass tells us why they want Democrats to vote in the Republican race.
Well, during a presidential primary in Michigan, you can only pick one party's ballot. And back in 2020, in the city of Detroit, 98% of residents selected a Democratic ballot. But there is a group here in Detroit this year that is urging Democrats to pick up a Republican ballot and vote against Donald Trump and for Nikki Haley. It's the day before the primary, and absentee ballots are still coming in. But some voters weren't too thrilled about their choices.
I feel probably like a lot of people feel right now that our choices are, between a rock and a hard place. How do you pick between the best of two poisons?
Detroit resident Julia Yesbick is one of many Democrats voting uncommitted instead of voting for Joe Biden.
Even if a small gesture, I feel like by voting uncommitted, I can send a message and say, you need to do better.
That's exactly the type of voter that Robert Schwartz with the Primary Pivot Super PAC is targeting. He's a Democrat urging support for Nikki Haley in the Republican primary.
They're just trying to make a point on the Democratic side, but there's an actual race on the Republican side. So if you want to use your vote strategically, you have to vote on the Republican side.
Schwartz has traveled the country and is in Detroit this week, hoping to stop Donald Trump from winning the nomination, despite polls suggesting that Haley could beat Biden in November.
What I tell people, despite Nikki Haley beating Joe Biden in the polls, is if we really care about our democracy, as we've said for the last 9 years, then we should be willing to take that risk.
But many Democrats, from the state party chair to regular voters, say they are still casting a primary vote for Biden.
In my mind, the important vote here is a vote for Joe Biden. A vote tomorrow and then a vote again in November is how we ensure that Donald Trump loses.
I'd rather have Joe Biden in office, barely can walk, talk or think, than to have Donald Trump in office.
In a statement made over the weekend about Haley's campaign, Trump campaign spokesperson Stephen Chung said in part, quote, "She can't name one state she can win, let alone be competitive in." The fact is that Haley's campaign has now turned into a full-fledged Never Trump operation, with her as crooked Joe Biden's biggest surrogate. Now, many of the candidates that did make it on the Republican ballot have since dropped out, so be sure to do your research before casting your vote. And if you haven't sent back your absentee ballot yet, and you have an absentee ballot, you want to make sure to drop that off in person or at your local drop box. In Detroit, I'm Brett Cass, 7 Action News.
Thank you, Brett. And with less than 24 hours until the polls open on Election Day, Michigan's taking advantage of 2 voting options. According to the Secretary of State, over 1 million people have voted ahead of the presidential primary. 934,000 returned completed absentee ballots, and 78,000 people showed up to vote at an early voting site. Now, we got a breakdown of what you need to know about tomorrow's primary election, including who's on the ballot, how to know if you are registered, and polling locations and hours. You'll find a link right there on the homepage at WXYZ.com.